Hey, Buru, Iboya, Ibuche, everybody in Cyberlands, your favorite Bawalao, at least I hope so. Omodu, Mondileke coming at you with another great video. Hey, like always, I told you guys that we're gonna start 2025, with a pack, right? And we are, right? And we're gonna start, with the inspirational Sundays, like I like to call it, right? Take that token from my wife who named it. But nonetheless, the idea is to, hey, how do we give thanks, right? It's the end of the week. We're about to start another work week. People get busy, people start kind of, trucking along, and sometimes we get overwhelmed and we get busy, right? So this particular, live, I wanted to kind of make sure that since we're in the beginning of the year, this is episode number one of these inspirational Sundays. That I think it's only fitting that we talk about the Odu Ifá, the first Odu, right? And what does it mean, and where does it go, right? And I would challenge everybody to, if you have a sign or an Odu, an Ikofa or Awofaka, or if you're an Abawalao and you want to know more insight or perspective, right? Definitely ask questions in the chat. For those of you who see that there's multiple people on Zoom with me, I'll definitely welcome Maile to jump on and show their beautiful faces and with any hopes, they have questions as well. Because I really do think it's a community thing, right? It's not just a YouTube thing, but I think it's an Ile thing. I think it's a YouTube thing. I think it's how do we all get together as one and make sure that we pass on the culture and the traditions of the thing. So, with that said, a lot of great things are happening, and I want to jump right into it. So I'm going to look at the chats. Boya to Alyssa, Boya KD. I know I got Joel, I got Yamadi, Boya. Who else I got out here? I got a couple people in the chat. Let me make sure. I got Daniela, I got Chastity, Boya, Boya. They decided not to join in the video. Good for them. Good for them. That's good. All right. So hey, so wanted to kind of talk about Baba Ejiogbe. Right. Hey, I wanna talk to you guys about a Baba Ejiogbe, right? For many reasons, right? One, you know, Baba Ejiogbe is Ifa wisdom. Baba Ejiogbe is the cornerstone. Baba Ejiogbe is the Oduna, not only the first, but it's the most significant in Ifa, practice. Right? It just serves as kind of a guide, right, for balance, for light, truth, right, in our spiritual and daily lives. Little boy Paul. But there's some things about Baba Yobe that a lot of people just don't understand. There are things that we're gonna have to focus on if we truly want to get in alignment with Baba Yobe. Baba Yobe, we gotta understand, is the beginning of everything, which means that it's the beginning of all things that are good and all things that are bad, right? And so when you start to look at that, I want you to kind of take this into the perspective of, let's not only learn about Baba Yobe, but if you have Baba Yobe, maybe in one of your consecrations, or maybe you have a version of a Yobe, right? The Omolus, right? The variations of Obe. Um, this is a good message for you, right? So we got to kind of start to focus on that a little bit. So when we talk about a Yobe, we talk about the father of the Odu. We talk about the origin of creation, divine light, harmony, right? Baba Yobe is known as the father of double salvation, right? And I'm going to share why this is known as the father of double salvation with a pataki that I think is going to begin to truly highlight, what is Baba Yobe and I guess the energy that flows with it. So in this particular pataki, I wanna focus on, Eyobe, was sent from the heavens, right, by Olodumare to earth to serve as kind of like an agent of harmony, wisdom, benevolence, right? And his mission was to demonstrate what it means to be of noble heart and to guide humanity. So Eyobe was born to Orishanla, right, and a woman named Afin.
What is your occupation?
So what that means, let's see, make sure everybody's muted on here. So Ejiogbe was born to Oshanla and a woman named Afin. While Oshanla desperately desired, a child, Afin did not share the same. Right? So during her pregnancy, tension arose, exacerbated, right, by the differences and the mutual misunderstanding, right? Just like in anything else, there was a friction point between, the couple. So the couple both had prohibitions, right? One, or the Shalah, wasn't able to consume palm wine, and Afin was prohibited from using salt. And this dynamic friction within the home started to kind of elevate. And then 9 months later, right, Afin gave birth to her son. And shortly after the birth, Oshanla left, right, to gather food for the family. And then when Oshanla left and left the baby with Afin, right, there was kind of an anger that occurred, that was brewing, that was kind of stirring. And now Oshanla is running late, right, in the market. So Afin attempted to poison Ochanla by adding palm wine to his drink. When Ochanla was about to drink the water, right, the newborn spoke. Yes, a newborn spoke, right? And it warned, right? It warned him of the danger, right? This miraculous event, right, revealed the divine nature of Ejiogbe descending to this world. 7 days later, they named him Ejiogbe, which means double salvation, because he had saved both his parents from destruction. Right. So Ejiogbe began to kind of mend that relationship and became that informal leader that needed to happen in that own family. So Ejiogbe, you already kind of see, has a very distinct place, even in the home. And we're going to start to look at outside the home and just the energy that it brings forward. So Ejiogbe was a prodigy. Ejiogbe performed, mysterious and miraculous things, from a young age. He was, his first miracle, they say, was at the age of 15 when his mother took him to the central market where all the celestial and the earthly beings, at this point, everybody was kind of intermingling, right? And begins to conduct transactions. And on their way, Ejiogbe met a woman who had a particular problem. She had been pregnant for 3 years. Can you imagine, ladies, if you were pregnant for 3 years? Yes, that does not sound good, right? Without any progress in her condition. So Ejiogbe prescribed a specific sacrifice, including snails, all types of things, right? And after performing the sacrifice, the woman successfully gave birth, right? So that was one of the biggest things that you begin to see. Later on, Ejiogbe, served as a servant of humanity, offering services for free, tirelessly working, resolving disputes, healing the sick, assisting the pregnant, bringing peace to the oppressed. Ejiogbe, his dedication to justice and compassion earned him immense popularity, right? But it was provoked, right, with jealousy. And this is a reason why, can't have the good without the bad. And that's something that we always got to remember. So there were many people who felt threatened, right, of this revolutionary approach, right, and this governance, right, of fairness. So due to Ejiogbe's, right, extraordinary acts and the ripple effects on the earth, the elders accused him of disrupting the world order. Right? They went to Olodumare to complain. Olodumare was intrigued by the accusations. Right? So he sent a celestial, kind of envoy, a messenger, right, to kind of disguise as a poor man to observe Ejiogbe and see what Ejiogbe's actions look like. So upon reaching Ejiogbe's house, the disguised messenger, witness Ejiogbe doing selfless nature, selfless acts, firsthand. And eventually the messenger revealed his true identity, summoned Ejiogbe to the heavens for a divine tribunal. And during this proceeding, the celestial messenger defended Ejiogbe, right? And explaining that his deeds exemplified what it is to have divine wisdom and compassion. So Ejiogbe, his legacy, Ejiogbe's life emphasized patience, right? Perseverance, sacrifice as the pathway to overcoming the challenges and achieving the impossible. So this story kind of serves as an eternal reminder of the importance of truth, dedication, and the service to humanity. Right. So those initiated into the mysteries, are advised to that we gotta avoid certain things in life. People who have this odung need to avoid certain things in life. If it doesn't surround itself with truth, dedication, service to humanity, organization, right, then it's gonna begin to tumble and fall apart. And we gotta be very careful about that. And we gotta make sure that we all understand that. So very, very, very important. Okay, so now let me just jump in here and make sure I don't got anything, no questions from the group here. Hey, Buddha boy Abucheche, Mayo, Alafia, Buddha boy Abucheche, Marco, beautiful. All right, and for everybody who's on Zoom, make sure you're muted and you're good to go. All right, so if there's no questions, we're gonna keep pushing forward. All right, so you guys heard the moral, the story, right? You guys get the moral, hopefully. When this particular Odun has very, very distinct taboos, very distinct ewos, right? Things that we have to be very considerate about, as we move forward. Eyobe is a sign that talks a lot about, not only that it's the cornerstone, not only that it's the light and the balance, but because people with this Odun or people with the Omolus, the combinations of Obe, begin to find themselves, if they don't have the alignment of their Ori, if they're not following their divine destiny, and they're not beginning to employ some of those acts of just kindness, those acts of organization, those acts of making sure that there's nothing that's going to taint their way, then we begin to kind of see where their downfall begins. And it's a very dangerous precedence because Eyobe comes with a lot of beautiful things, but it comes with a lot of responsibility that we have to manage and we got to look at. Right, so let's think about it, right? So the symbolism in Eyobe, the duality and balance between the light and the dark, the material and the spiritual realms. I already told you this is Ire and Osobo. This is where all the good and all the bad, 100%. So when you start talking about that, we got to begin to look even deeper and say, okay, you know, one of the biggest, I think, hurdles that we begin to find in Yobe is that a lot of people need to understand that, the trials and tribulations in life is the duality of the blessings that are going to come. Yobe doesn't have it easy, right? Because they have to have the balance in their life, the good and the bad, and they got to be able to filter through it. They got to be able to do the ebos that they need spiritually in order to get things right. But for the modern take of things, here's one of the challenges, right? Eyobe was a born leader. Those who have Yobe, right, as their Omolu or maybe it is Baba Yobe, you're born to be a leader. You're born to govern. You're born to do things in order to enlighten and to push the world forward. So when we begin to see that concept, you can see where the rub begins. If you have a job or a profession, right, and you don't know how to be a good follower, right, in order to be a good leader, you got to be a good follower first. Or maybe you have people who are not necessarily ready to follow you. You see where the rub begins, right? You're meant to lead and you're meant to push forward. So in the modern concepts of things, we got to remember our place. We got to remember where we're going. We got to remember, those dynamics that are around us so that we can be successful going forward. And Yoga teaches us that we have to understand the audience. We got to understand that emotional intelligence. We got to understand, people, because Ejiogbe speaks a lot about Obatala. And when we talk about Obatala, we talk about the owner of heads, right? When we always hear the same, saying that cool heads will prevail, you got to begin to understand those type of concepts. So we got to understand Ori. We got to understand balance. We got to understand Obatala. We got to understand quite a few different things when it comes to Ejiogbe. So some of the things you want to avoid, right? You don't want to be deceitful. You don't want to be dishonest. You don't want to you want to kind of stay away from some of the darker colors of things. You want to wear more white because white is what brings the purity in life. One of the biggest stories I think that kind of resonates with a yobe is the act of when we talk about obi, right? Obi abong for the lukumi. When we talk about the coconut, right? And when you open up the coconut, it's nice and white, right? But how did the coconut become the coconut, right? And there's other patakis that begin to say where the coconut was the most divine being. The coconut was the one that was supposed to lead this world that we're in today. And when we begin to put that into perspective, right, we got to begin to understand that the coconut fell from grace, right? And because it fell from grace, now falls on the ground because when we cast it in divination, what are we doing? We're throwing it on the floor. So as a reminder, right? And that reminder is in line with Ejiogbe. Okay. So let me make sure I got nobody on the chat. But the boy are good, perfect. All right, so let me hear from each and every one of you. What are your experiences with Ori? What is your experiences with Ejiogbe? What is your experience with Obe or any Omolu that you may have in one of your signs? If you have one, great. If not, we keep moving. Anybody got questions, please feel free. If not, we keep it moving. All right, let's keep it moving. Hey, so I'm gonna try to go through these signs fairly quickly. All right. And I want to make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page here, right? When we talk about Eyob, we talk about the first sign, number one. And then when we got the Omolus, we got Obeyeko, we got Obewuri, right? We got Obedi, Iroso, Mowani, Obara, Okana, right? And you keep it moving, right? So there's many combinations, right? So remember, everyone is combined between 16 and 16 Oduns, right? So the primary Oduns, the Meis, go from Eyobe to Aregun or Ofun, right? So when you look at those 16, they all go into each other, which is what gives us the 256 signs, right, of Odu Ifá. All right, so then let's talk about Eyobe, right? We talked a lot about it. We talked about the leader. We talked about the envy, right? Because you got to remember, a lot of people are going to have a rub. That rub I was talking about, if you're a natural born leader and you got good instincts and you got good intuition and you begin to utilize the essence of this Odun and what this Odun is trying to teach us, right? Then here we go. You're going to run into friction points because the world is not perfect and the world is going to have the duality that we talk about, the good and the bad. So you're going to run into envy. Yobe is the sun. When the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, right? We got to look at Yobe. We got to remember Yobe. Yobe is the essence and the reason why we do head purgaciones. We do head cleansings. Right? Yobe begins to teach us the mysteries and the secrets, right? And much aligned with Obatala, who's the owner of the heads, like we talked about. So you begin to kind of see where all these things kind of come together. All right. And then when you go even further, let's say we talk about Eyobe in the sense of the spirit of Eyobe, right? We talk a lot about the signs of Ori, right? And I saw your question there, Janae, on Zoom. Ori. Ori is your inner subconscious for those who are not necessarily familiar with the concepts of Ori. Ori is the divine essence that God touched you with, which makes all of us part of God's energy. right? None of us are left to our own demise. No, we're here by divine order. Right? So because of that, Ori becomes a very important factor in here because Ori begins to tell us that our mind and our subconscious mind inside the head, right, that has nothing to do with Obatala, right, is now in control and is the most important and most powerful thing that we all have, right? And no one can take that away from you. No Orisha, no divination, no Ebo. Your Ori is your Ori and it's governed by God. This is the reason why people get hand of Ifa. This is the reason why you have to understand that when we are divining for you, when you receive your hand of Ifa, we have the tablet in front of us, right? We are marking, we are touching, we are connecting. But what are we connecting to? But your Ori, right? So then, when you think about it in that concept, now you understand the importance of Ori, and Ori lives in Ejiogbe, because that's what Ejiogbe tells us. Ejiogbe tells us that it's the nucleus of all activities is Ejiogbe. Yobe tells us because it's so powerful with the concept of the head that we got to be careful that we're not stressing. We got to be careful that we don't find ourselves in isolation, divorce, alienation. Those type of things become very prevalent in the world of Obis because Yobe is meant to be a born leader, but at the same time has to lead their own family as well. Obe is a sign where you begin to see that they have to begin to rally the troops. And if you know that we're all of free will, we're all have different ODs, and none of us are cookie cutter, some may begin to fight, that divine alignment. So then when they begin to fight it, then Ayobe begins to stress. Right? Ayobe is looking for organization. Ayobes have to be organized. This is a sign where, the brain is awakening every other piece of function in your body. But Ayobe in this world, in this material world, is awakening the spirituality of this world. Ayobe is very much deep into many different aspects of just life in general. Ayobe, when you look at it, has one specific rule. What you put out is what you're going to get back. So those of you with Obe in their sign, if you happen to have Obe, this is a very good lesson. It's positive thinking, right? If you tend to have negative thoughts, if you tend to be a a pessimist, maybe, right? You begin to find yourself, right, constantly absorbing negativity, constantly receiving negativity, right? If you're constantly in that headspace, that's what you're gonna get. But if you're in the positive headspace, right, nothing but good things are going to happen. Stay spiritual, stay devoted, obedient, take care of business, right? And don't allow yourself to be either manipulated because someone is pushing your buttons. Stay positive, and you're going to see a lot of beautiful things. When you begin to jump into, let's say, like the Odum of Obeyekun, for those who have Obeyekun, we talk a lot about the uh, the aspects of, I guess the best way to put it is, you notice you got Obe and you got Oyeku, number one and number two, right? And you put them together. And because that's the very first combination, we like to refer to this as the Baba Omolu, which means the combination or the father of combinations. But this is a very interesting sign because Obe, we talked about the light, we talked about the sun, everything is beautiful, but Yekun is the darkness. And I'm not going to get into that right now. We'll talk about Oyekun whenever we talk about Oyekun. But this is a sign where, we got to be very careful, right? This is the sign that tells us that the great respect to the elders must be adhered to. I think that this is probably one of the most important Odun from 256. One of the most important. because it begins to lay out the foundation and the culture and the tradition that we live in, right? The respect for the elders, ensuring that the orishas in the home are never neglected, making sure that we understand, certain concepts and traditional aspects like mariwo. What is mariwo? Why do spiritual people or priests or priestesses have mariwo over the door? What is those type of things? Hey, stay away from the things that can become an addiction like alcohol, right? And it begins to really start to speak on those things because you notice it's the day and the night, the duality, the balance that's going to control and push things forward. So those with people with Obeyekum, we also begin to kind of see as two polar opposites begin to collide, there's the ability of storms, hurricanes, typhoons, all types of change, transformation. So Obeyekun is one of those beautiful signs, right? Obeyekun is a sign where, when we talk about, every day, right? At least I hope so. We all brush our teeth, right? And we talk about the sacred story of when Oloko and Ogun were the first ones to try to come into this world and try to mold it into something, right, in order to make it habitable for humans. And it was Orubila who eventually figured out how to make it habitable with the help of Eshu and the elders and whatnot. But when Ogun came down, one of Ogun's advices to Orumila was, as an elder, make sure they all, put sticks in their mouths, right? Because Ogun was giving his followers sticks to eat, in order to survive, which didn't really work. But the stick evolved, right, to dental hygiene and whatnot. But it's the beautiful things like that you find in these patakis and these oduns that you begin to kind of give you some relevance, right? That Odu Ifá is everywhere, even in something simple like brushing your teeth. So then, and I don't want to neglect anybody from YouTube land, so let me make sure I'm looking at YouTube. But all right, then we look at Obehuenya. Let's see, little boy, is there a way to stay off of the jealousy of others? All right, let's start reacting to some of these questions. Hey, you know what? So, Abba, some of the spiritual concepts about avoiding jealousy is going to be a couple of things because Obe begins to tell you that if you're not careful, and you're going to hear me talk about this in the next sign of Bewenya, you got to be careful about revealing your secrets. You got to be careful about, how a lot of people like to kind of celebrate, right? You celebrate your accomplishments. You celebrate, hey, got a brand new job, right? And you see the haters out there, right? Or maybe they're not haters. Maybe these are people, right, who are just happy for you, but wish they had what you had. And maybe it's not malicious, right? So then you find that people start to kind of isolate themselves a little bit. And Obe, remember that was one of my warnings. Be careful not to isolate yourself. It's not that you don't need to celebrate your accomplishments, but you got to lock those things down. And at the same token, Ifa teaches us, and your Odun teaches you the herbs that you're going to need to use in order to clean yourself and cleanse yourself, right? And the little tricks about making sure you keep those things off of you. Those things are very important. So that's a very, very, very good question, but it's just little tricks of the trade. Hopefully that answers your question, Abba. Hey, Buru boy Abucheche Millen. Buru boy Abucheche. That's a version of myself. Okay, so now we go into Obewenya. Obewenya. Now we go into the third sign of the Obe series, and we talk about the Eguns. Right? We talk about where now the drumming of the Eguns, the existence of the Eguns is now trying to come into fruition. We begin to kind of see where Ifa starts to talk about where Orun, right, where the singing of the Eguns come, and Orun, which talks about the ancestral plane, start to come to a mesh. And we begin to kind of see the coexistence, right? So in this particular sign, we begin to kind of see that, we have to be able to give thanks to our elders. Right? Obenwenya is telling you that, we got to be very cautious on how we are acting. We got to learn from the lessons of others. Right? This is the why, in this particular sign, you'll see that a lot of folks hone in on, okay, I got to have order and discipline. And I got to have respect to the elders, but I also got to have respect to my ancestors. I got to be able to push forward, right, as a person, and I need to ensure that I don't have, any negative thoughts going in. And the reason why is because Obeweña is actually the first sign that begins to introduce the witches of the night. Right, when we start to talk about people throwing bad things and brujeria, and we start, this is Obeweña, right? Yobe already told us the good and the bad, you get it all. But what's important here is that the Yayes only mark, right? The witches of the night are only mark, and the witches of the night is a concept that is very much tied into negative influence, ilenini, right? So that negativity that comes towards you, right? For those who have bad attitudes, for those who are, negative in nature, those who, are not aligning themselves with their Ori. Because sometimes when we say, certain things, hey, be careful. If you do this, this is gonna happen. Um, just remember, Ifa is not cookie cutter, right? So there's no fear tactics here, right? This is not a religion-based Ten Commandment type thing, but it's a thing that you just need to understand that if you're not following your taboos, if you're not following your Ori, you're not following, your hand of Ifa Odu and prophecy, right? Then you begin to kind of align yourself with these things that are not necessarily positive in life. So I want to make sure I clear that up immediately. The other thing that I would tell you is that, I already told you that, as a leader in Babayobe and as the duality in Oyekun, and now we get into Wenya, we start talking about, the lack of conformity, right, in one's life because one might get confused and Obewania begins to share that with us where, hey, where am I going? How am I getting there? You begin to kind of see these things, right? So, as I begin to kind of, explain this to you, I want you guys to kind of just take that moment to kind of just think this out a little bit, right? It's important to have a vector. Obewania needs a mentor. Obewania needs a mature person that can guide them physically, spiritually, etc. Bewenya is a sign that it talks a lot about the spirit of the mother, the nurturing mother. This is why, Bewenya, we gotta look to the moms. We gotta look to the grandmoms. We gotta take care. You gotta take care of your egun. You gotta take care of your egun. And that's the bottom line. And Obewenya is a sign where the relationships need to be strong. Obewenya is a sign where men need to learn how to coexist with their partners because unfortunately this doesn't happen very well in Obewenya, right? A lot of times they gotta beware, you know, with folks, at least with the sign of Obewenya, we begin to kind of see the trend of someone is always trying to get with the person in order for their hearts to be broken, right? But it's all based on vengeance. It's all based on negativity, right? So Obewenya and those that align with Obewenya gotta be careful with that. Your relationships, you got to make sure you're vetting those things properly so those things don't come to fruition. Robewenya is a beautiful sign because it's a sign of Ochun. Mafarafungo Ochun all day in the sign, right? Because here is where Ochun was first given, right, as a gift, right, to adorn, right, the secrets of, well, not the secrets of, but the gift of the tools of the Opun, the Opele, and a small jar of Ierosu, right? Because Ochun, we already understand, as the Apitibi of Orumila, understood that what it was to be the custodian of Ifa of Orumila. So, beautiful thing when it comes to Ochun, particularly in this sign. Then we go to Obedi. Obedi kakadi adifayoko baraigun adifafun Oshun. Okay, Obedi. Obedi is a good one. I like Obedi because Obedi is, this is where Ori, right, is given the power to control the head, right? Here's the interesting part, right? If you break the human body down, believe it or not, all body parts and limbs and organs, everything is representative to an orisha. Everything's representative to some form of being, right? That can be tied into the Yoruba cosmology. So when we say that, right, we talk about Obedi now taking control, right? So Obedi now takes control of the head. Obedi is now giving us advice. Obedi is the reason why, for the adults in here that know about the birds and the bees, right? Obedi is the reason why sometimes we say we think with the wrong head. You guys know what I mean? So Obedi is when where you know, the man part and the female part. I don't want to get banned from YouTube, so I gotta choose my words wisely. Where the man part and the female part went to war. Yeah. Bedi was the sign where we had to begin to understand where these parts needed to be and what they needed to be used for, right? Because so Obedi becomes when the war ends, when man and woman first start to, produce, right? And we start to talk about the land, right, of the art of lovemaking. That's Obedi. Obedi is a beautiful sign, a mysterious sign, right? Because check this out. Obatala is the actual true owner, right, of the semen that is white, that produces, and the women, right, hold the womb, right? And there's an act of spirituality that happens in the art of lovemaking that lives in Obedi that begins to come into fruition, right, for humanity. So when you start to kind of see those things, you say, wow, okay, the art of lovemaking. And then we start also talk about an Obedi. Now this is the sign that we use to wake up Orumila in the morning. Obedi is one of the few signs that actually has a direct correlation and can directly, well, I won't even say one of the few. It's one of the signs, right? Where we can say that this is what's gonna wake up Orumila. This is what's gonna happen. And later on, when I say Obesa, you're gonna see is followed, by this Odun in waking up Orumila, right? The things that the Bawalaos have to be trained for in order to ensure that we are calling down the divinity of wisdom and divination and destiny, right? And making sure those things come into fruition. Obedi. Obedi is a sign where, and I'm gonna speak a little frank here on this one, but Obedi is one of those signs where, the in-laws, for those of you who are married, Obedi, the in-laws you gotta kind of keep an eye on. Not that they're bad or anything like that, right? But they can be. But they can be. And that can cause a lot of trouble and trials and tribulations in the marriage, right? And so for those who obedi, just understand you have a struggle, right? Understand that you're gonna have to work to make sure that that never becomes a problem. Not that it will be a problem, is that you have to be aware that that could be a problem. And obedi, this is a sign where we look at Mafarafun Ogun, and Ogun will always be, there for us. Ogun is always going to be the one that's gonna come forward and take care of us. Obedi is the one at the end of the day, right? That we have to understand that the body, right, the body itself has a shadow. Obedi is a sign that always reminds us that we got to remember the duality that we have, and we got to maintain organization in our lives. Obedi is a sign that if you have it in your eco file Wofaga, you have to get the consecration of Ori. It's just there is no if and buts about it. You gotta go find and get that consecration of Ori. Obedi. Obedi is a beautiful sign because Obedi says if you're a male, then you should have all the rights to go to Ifá, right? Don't pass go, don't collect $200. This is where you need to go. But I'm not gonna talk about that because that's a whole other topic that I think everybody will start kind of throwing things out there, and then I'll lose myself because I'm trying to talk about Obe. All right. So then when we talk about Oberoso tini, Oberoso tenía. Oberoso is a sign. It talks about the fish. Right? If you ever guys ever notice that the fish, the tail never stops moving. Right? It's always moving. That fish tail never stops. Because certain things in life have to always keep going. Right. And so then when we look at Oberoso, we look at the aspects of Oberoso is a sign that says that we need to learn to use nature for its exact use. Oberoso says that we cannot discredit nature because we're discrediting ourselves. For those who align with the sign of Oberoso, something that I really want you guys to think about is going to be take care of Mother Nature, one. Understand who your issue is, two. Understand the issue in Oberoso is going to be very important because Oberoso is a concept of sometimes we have to put the Orishas to sleep or rest. And Oberoso is the one that allows us to do that. Sometimes we have to put to rest even the negative energy in this world, right? As you begin to kind of see that Obe already told us that you get the good and you get the bad, right? But Oberoso begins to talk to us about that. But also tells us that there's gonna be a time, especially if you have this sign, that you're gonna have to pass through the room of Ibaocha. You're gonna have to go get crowned, right? Because Oberoso says it's trying to save you from something. It's trying to put something to rest so something can begin. That's what Obe does. So when you start to kind of put those things into perspective, you say, damn, okay. Oberoso has a lot of things to do with a lot of different aspects. Oberoso is the sign that says that the lies are within the truth and the truth are within the lies. So if you are lying with Oberoso, you understand that, you know, um, you have to be able to piece together logically, strategically, how are things going to flow? Is that true? Is that not? Is that a disillusion? Is someone just lying? What is going on? You can't jump and react on the very first piece of information. Beroso tells you you can't do that. So for those of you who align with the power of Beroso, but a little bit of information, right? On Beroso, but still good information for all of us, I would imagine, right? Oberoso. Oberoso says that as we put the orishas to sleep, the eguns need to come out and play. So guess what? You gotta tend the eguns. You gotta get on top of those eguns, right? And that's gonna be very important as you begin to kind of go through some things. But also says that Eshu laughs at your problems. Because if you align with Oberoso, sometimes you think your problems are so great and they're not, right? I told somebody earlier today, sometimes we got to think about it and we got to say, is it they really that bad? You know, are we just having a bad day? Is it just a small problem that just seems big, but it really isn't? And that's something that we got to remember. Because Oberoso says that those bad days and those little things, and then we put the Orishas to sleep and attend the Eguns, leaves us vulnerable, right, to Egun Buruku. Right? When we talk about the Eguns of negativity to a certain point. That's why people in Oberoso, there's a lot of things that we gotta work with you. We gotta attend the Eshu Chango, Egun, we got to make sure that we do certain rites and rituals to the point where even a lot of times in Oberoso, just because it aligns in your path, aparado is typically necessary to remove negative eguns, egun buruku, basically, right? That is attached to you. So Oberoso, a beautiful sign, a strong sign, a powerful sign, but comes with its own cost. Oberoso is the reason why, we do special ceremonies with the head and with certain things that go on the head, the certain modes that go on the head. But also begins to kind of tell us that because it understands the reinforcement that's necessary, the extra oomph for the alignment. But also, Ejiogbe, you start to see where there's a lot of similarities where we're talking about alignment when we talk about Ejiogbe. Hey, Buruboy Buche J Kong, Buruboy Buche Che Queen, Greg, Greg, Buruboy Woni Rumila, and Pichi. All right. Hey, so then we're gonna move on. Let's go to Obewali. Oh, Obewali. Obewali is the reason. You notice in And Beroso, I say, hey, we put the Orishas to sleep. You gotta kind of or rest. I won't say asleep. You put them to rest, and we gotta tend the eguns. And then while we're there, we're vulnerable, and we gotta be careful with the eguns, etc. So Ifa came out and said, hey, well, let me do something better for you. Let me give you something that is going to begin to connect you with your ancestors even better. Obewali, right? So now we're going to take a piece of the earth and we're going to begin to consecrate this earth with Odus of Ifa using the power of Obewali in order to consecrate something that's called the tile of Egum. That is called, well, we know it as the Teja de Egum, right? And this is where the Teja de Egum is born from, is Obewali. Because we got to be able to do more for the Egums, right? You could only do the candle and the water and the flowers for so long before, even that needs a little bit more oomph. Maybe in life, I don't need, a AAA battery, I need a AA battery, right? And then maybe I need a D battery. We need to kind of step our games up. And Obewali tries is the one that's going to facilitate bringing that game up higher. But Obewali is a sign that talks a lot about, you know, that we got to be careful on our actions because of its strong significance, right? With a lot of different orishas like Eshu, Batala, Babaluaye, Ochun, Rumila, you know, Obewali tells us that we got to be very careful because the land of the Egun can sometimes be temperamental, but it can also bring us things. Many people forget that the Eguns, when they attack you from the Egun Buruku side, right, the dark side, they attack you from Tuyurori. That's why it's the Obe signs that start to create these reinforcements, right, for your Ori, your head, etc. So then when they begin to attack, there's a portion of your Ori that lives in your left toe, right? And they begin to attack you from there and they cause health problems, etc. So in Obewali, it says, hey, as we begin to open up this portal to the land of the Eguns, it's going to be very important for us to always remember that we got to protect ourselves. Right? We got to remember that diseases, we got to be careful with them, right? So then with those who align with Obewali have to be careful about those things. They got to be careful with diseases, the influence of the eguns, right? That maybe don't have good intentions, have bad intentions. We talk about where a lot of times females, particularly because of their spirituality, females are probably, females compared to males have the divine order of things, right? They create life and they're very special in that case. And so then they are extra affected by the eguns in their mind, right? Because the eguns get in there and they start to create this illusion of what things should and should not be. So the children of Obewali have to be careful with those things. So that's what leads to a lot of people falling into the wrong side of the road, right? People in Obewali, and no disrespect to anybody, and I'm sure everybody has Obewali under control, but I'm just gonna say it because it's in a sign. This is a sign where the person can't necessarily stay stable in relationships, finds themselves in prostitution, there's a lot of different things that fall under Obewali that we always got to be careful about. So people who have these signs got to be careful, not only with that, but with drugs and alcohol and things like that. So Bewali is a strong sign, but if not tamed and tapered in the right way, can cause a lot of problems because then the person does not feel like they're enough. That's where we get into problems in Obewali. The person has a lack or feels that there's a lack of appreciation that's going on. But nonetheless, Obewale is a beautiful sign that has a very good connection to Egun, has a very good connection to Obatala, right? Just has its own pros and cons, just like anything else. Right? And every Odun has pros and cons. Right? So don't think anybody that this is a bad Odun. This is not. This is a sign of Ashikwelu. This is the sign of Osain. This is one of the signs of Odudua. Odu, right? So that is how we begin to build the stability on this earth was because of Obewali. Now we go into the next sign of Obara, okay? And then I'm probably gonna try to stop it there, right? And try to field any questions I may have on Zoom, any questions that I may have in the chat, and then we'll pick up with Obekana probably the next time I do part two of Ejiogbe, right? And then we'll close up the Obe all together, and then we're just gonna get after it, right? And that'll be Inspiration Sunday for the next go. But I really want to take Inspiration Sunday and I want to make it something greater. I want to make this not about a topic that I pick, right? Obviously, I'm going to pick something because we got to talk about something. And I don't want to stay quiet. But I also want you guys to bring questions to the table, right? Let's start to make sure that we're reacting and we're asking those questions and we're building our spirituality for 2020. So then we talk about Obebara. When we talk about Obebara, we talk a lot about the pigeons. We talk a lot about the sacredness, so that is the pigeons. We talk a lot about the problems that the pigeons had, right? And when I look at Obebara, I think one of the biggest things that I worry about is the infighting, because Obebara is one of those signs that says that group dynamics is something that can be really tricky. Obebara is a sign where the brothers and the sisters, right, begin to fight, the sibling warfare. Obebara is a sign that, it says that there's hidden secrets and hidden things and betrayals that we got to be careful about. Obebara, right, is a sign that talks a lot about where people enter the faith, right, and want to know more than the godparents or the Olu CYU or the Olorisha or however way we want to refer it to. And I think it's important to understand this piece, right? And it's not necessarily that they want to know more, because I think Bebara is to not we cannot unvalue experience, unvalue the things that are out there, because here's something, and I had this conversation with my elder the other day, Owani Mosu, Arturo, and him and I were talking, and I said, hey, listen, and it was a different topic, but I said, no one can ever take experience away. But Babalao has 30 years of experience, and someone else has mechanics, right? Which is better, the mechanics or the experience? And this is where Bebara begins to clash, right? Because many times you're going to see that the experience will outweigh just on the philosophical sense and being able to know that something is wrong than the mechanical sense. Because the mechanical only take you so far. If someone teaches you something and you know the mechanics because that is what you were taught, but it was wrong, you will never know it's wrong. Right? So now you got to look at the philosophical side of things and the experience side of things to know, like, oh, wait, 1 + 1 = 2. And wait a minute, this mechanic here is saying 1 + 1 = 3, and I don't understand. And you start getting into these. There's where Obebada starts to have the rub. Obebada is a very intelligent sign. Obebada is a sign where they're not ready to let go of the gas. They're gonna fight and they're gonna go hardcore, and that's okay, and that has a place for everyone. So Bebara, you know what I mean? Bebara is a sign where the person is very investigative. The person can sometimes be labeled as nosy, right? Bebara is a sign where, when you begin to kind of look at their intuition and their drive, they're really good for business. They're really good for commerce, business, activities. So they're really good. You know what I mean? So I always tell, people Bebara, you know what I mean? That's a beautiful thing. Um, but that's always a beautiful thing nonetheless. All right, so there you go, guys. I gave you up to Bebara. We talked about Apataki, a very beautiful sign. And again, I always appreciate each and every one of you. So I'm gonna open up the questions. I don't see anything in the chat as of now. Anybody in Zoom world, if you got a question, throw it up. If not, we're gonna keep it moving. I know I'm looking at the chat in Zoom as well. Does the Odun touch on head, stomach, and feet? Janae, yeah, that's the study of the study of origin. When we talk about and Ori, there's different analogies on the study of Ori. Some people will say the Ori is broken down into three. There's other studies that give you the breakdown of eight, right? So then there's a lot of different ways to look at it. But yes, it is, right? Because Ori, we find the secrets of Ori in the Ejiogbe series of things. So you're absolutely correct. All right, Buru boy. And then Paul threw something in here. Is it possible for someone to receive Mano de Orula as a child? And when they were too young to remember? And if so, how will they know? If so, what then? Ah, well, it depends. Right? So Paul, everybody gets hand of Ifa. Doesn't matter, no age, no nothing. There is even times and ceremonies that we do where we give hand of Ifa before the baby's even born. Right? And then when the baby's born, we see what it was born with, right? So we can kind of understand its celestial pathway, right? And those are just variations of that ceremony, but absolutely everybody you need to know. Think about it like this. Imagine if you were a parent and you wanted to know how to navigate your child. Think about, I don't understand why my child's allergic to something. I don't understand why this doesn't sit right. I don't know why the baby's crying. I don't know why the baby wakes up at this time. I don't know why the baby's mean. I don't know why the baby punches the other kids in the face. I don't know why the kid is so quiet. I don't know why it's so smart. So think about it, right? But if Odu Ifá is going to give you a roadmap to say, hey, listen, this is what you're going to kind of have to do to maneuver your child. All right, little boy. You know what I mean? That's the reason, right? We're trying to align the child to a destiny, and that's only going to make the child better going forward. Right. So, Paul, hopefully that makes sense. Now, if they received it when they were young and now they don't know, they go back to a babalao. They already went through the ceremonies, right? And then we have to have that honest conversation to see how far do we need to go back into those ceremonies and what portion of those ceremonies do we need in order to push this information back out. Right? Because if we don't have the oduns or the signs to reflect on the child, then we got to do it again. Right? We got to do everything again because we don't have anything consecrated in order to help the child, the foundations, the ogun, the ochosi, the osun, the orumila. Right? So then we got to go down that route. That's a very good question, Paul. All right. Anything else? Going once, going twice on Inspirational Sunday. And boom, we're going to call it. Let's see. Any insight on Obara Bobe? I was wondering if somebody was gonna try to tell me something about another Odu. No, Obara Bobe. All right. So, Kang, I'm gonna let you think for a little bit. Tell me particularly what is it that you would like to understand, and I'm gonna start to talk to you about it, right? And I'm gonna give you some of the icings on the cake, right? I recently did a paper on Obara Bombe for a client. Um, you guys know if you go to the description, you go to the website, bang, I make papers. I create papers, customized papers for folks and their oduns, awofaka, ikofa breakdowns, etc. Um, and I actually made one just recently about Obara Bobe. Obara Bobe, is one of those signs where um you gotta constantly do it, boy. Every time I think about Obara Bobe, that's the first thing I think about is a bo. Because Obara Bobe tells us that one in bo doesn't solve your problem. And it takes us back to the Pataki of Obatala. When Obatala was walking and the sun was strong, Obatala went walking at high noon, right? The sun is at its peak. Obatala, what are you doing? Right? So Chango and Orumila had to hold a canopy over Obatala's head, right, in order to help him. So the Badaki has many significance there. It starts to tell us that, at a minimum, you're going to be needed to do three of both. I like to say two because Chango and Orumila were two, but that was just one story. In this particular sign, we learn about Eshu, Ogun, Ochosi, Osung that need to be fed, right? And that is very important, right? And so then when you look at it, you got four different Orishas that need to get fed, right? So you don't do anything with one Ebo. You have multiple Ebos. Obara Bobe is a sign where the person is always going to be surrounded by people who are going to cause them issues. Your neighbors, maybe even your I don't know, you name it, right? Co-workers. You're gonna be surrounded by people who are just gonna try not necessarily make your life very pleasant, right? It can sometimes push you to the edge, right? And this is the reason why we begin to kind of look at this old and we start to tell you that there's an embo that we do, the bawalaos, called apayero, and it's a very sincere embo that we do on a tablero. And the reason why we do it is because we have to remove this energy that sits in this particular sign. So when we talk about Obara Bobe, we talk about a couple of things. Obviously, you heard the patake about Obatala, so you got to be careful with your skin. I worry about skin cancer. I worry about irritations on the skin because of the sun, right? I worry about, financial stability, where money in, money out, right? Sometimes we have it, sometimes we don't, right? And it's because we're not using it for financial investments. We're not really, investing in the things that we got to invest in. Right? When I look at, Ovara Bobe, I begin to kind of look at, you know, females need to be very careful, with their womanly parts. And they got to be sensitive with their womanly parts. They got to get checked up. That's a very important in this sign for all women. And Obara Bombe, you can't live too carefree. You can't live, very liberal, right? You got to start to lock down your perspectives and your ethics and your morals. And you can't be jumping on the bandwagon with things. And I say that very respectfully, right? Because I know a lot of folks, nowadays, look at certain oduns and based on society and where society is going, right? We support a lot of different agendas. And I think, and I'm going to be very cautious to say this, you know what I mean? You got a lot of movements that are going on right now. That are they conservative or are they not? Do they fall in line with the concepts of, just science or not? Bada booba, you're plagued with that. That's your challenge. You know what I mean? And that's something you got to think about, right? Bada booba, you can't be too trusting. Right? You can't, even your friends will betray you if you're not careful. So bada booba, you got to understand that. Bada booba is a sign that says that everything that's covered will be uncovered, right? So then there's the other piece. Barabube talks about the separation of Chango and Ochun that took place. And this is why Chango priests cannot crown Ochun and Ochun cannot crown Chango in the rules and the discipline of Ibaocha, right? And because of it, we have to always stay disciplined to the rules. So if I begin to tell you about the rules and making sure that you follow the rules and making sure that you understand who you are, because in Obara Bobe, there's going to be a time where you're going to need to totally change the way you live. There's going to be a time where you're going to have to awaken and say, hey, I can't do this anymore. This is not going to work. And I need to change my ways. Oh, Obara Bobe. Beautiful. I'm sorry. I know I got on a rant. I said I was going to talk a little bit about it, and you guys got me talking. All right. Let's see. No, no, no. All right. It's a sign that the child has to pass through Ifa. That's my sign. I'm a child of Chango, 23 years old. That's a very difficult question. Kang, here's the thing. Here's the thing. So now that I know you're a male and maybe you go through Ifa, maybe you don't. There's more to it than just an Odun tells me to go to Ifa. There are a lot of different factors that have to go into I'm gonna go become an Awoni Orumila, right? It's not just there's an Odun, therefore I go. Mm-mm. I have to look at your Odun. I gotta look at the three Oduns, right? Hopefully you have your books with the three signs, your prophecy, and then what signs came out for your guardian Orisha, so I can understand the conversation with your guardian Orisha. Then we need to go to your guardian Orisha and we need to figure some things out. So we gotta be able to put everything together, right? And to make an informed decision. And then even then, if we can spiritually mark that your prescription says, yep, passes to Ifa, my buru boy, that's beautiful. But now, are you physically mature to receive Orumila in your home? Are you physically ready to cross over from the land of the living to the land of the dead and be a porter, right, for the world and for humanity, meaning crossing over from the land of the living to the land of the dead and constantly teetering and moving across orishas and eguns and humanity, right? And do you have the bandwidth and the capacity to do that, right? Not necessarily always, hey, can I? Should you? Right? And we got to make sure that the timing is right, right? Timing has always got to be right. Hopefully that answers your question, Kung. All right. Hey, Buddha boy, Lizzie. Nah, this is the letter of the year. No, this is not letter of the year. This is just no more education. Inspirational Sunday. But I did do a video on the letter of the years that you can find. Just look for it. It should have been a couple of videos back. I have one for Cuba and one for Miami. All right, Buddha boy. I was told I have and read that those who ori is Ejiogbe. I was told and have read that those whose ori is Ejiogbe. Abba. You're gonna have to explain that one a little bit. But hey, we're running out of time, guys. We've already been on here for about over an hour and going on an hour and 10 minutes. Obviously, I got all you guys on here and I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Must receive Obadala. No, if you get Ori and you come out Yobe, Obadala is not a bad thing to do because we understand the relationship with the owner, the head, and Ori that's inside the head. That there's some truth to that, but everything's got to get confirmed with Ifa. Not necessarily that we just go out blindly and do it. Okay, but that's a good question. All right. So hey, with that said, hey, thank you each and every one of you for tuning in. And again, if you guys all need anything, you guys hit me up. You got my contact information. You saw it in the beginning of the video. And with that said, Iburu, Iboya, Ibucheche, Cyberland. Thank you very much. I'm always here to do what I can. And let me just make sure I didn't leave anybody in the chat. Nope. All right, everybody's good. All right. Iburu boy, Ibucheche.
Puro boya, padrino.
Urubuya, Urubuya, Urubuya.
Iboru Iboya Bosheche Padrino.
It is officially ended.